Hi, everybody. How are y'all doing today? My name is Jax James, and I am the State Policy Manager here at NORML. It's been a busy week. Lots of things have been happening and going on across the country. This week, I'm kind of breaking it up a little bit differently than I normally do because we've had so many things moving. We're going to first talk about some of the highlighted legislation that has advanced or failed for those that we opposed, and then I'll be going into some additional updates. So first, let me just click over to the comments and make sure that I can see them so that I can answer your questions. So as I'm discussing all of these moving bills and legislation, I encourage you guys to drop where you're from and where you're watching so that I can see where our audience is from today. We usually get a pretty diverse crowd of people, and I love that. So let's go ahead and kick it off with a fellow Southern state. As y'all may recall, I'm based out of Texas, but Mississippi becomes the 37th state to provide medical cannabis access. A bill called the Mississippi Medical Cannabis Act became law on Wednesday. It regulates the production and distribution of cannabis flower and concentrates to patients with a multitude of diseases and qualifying ailments. In November of 2020, Mississippi voters decided between two separate ballot measures that sought to legalize medical cannabis access. 73% of the voters decided in favor of the Citizens Initiative. However, Republican lawmakers later challenged the legitimacy of the state voter initiative process, like the whole process. Members of the Supreme Court ultimately upheld the challenge by the state, and that decision nullified the 2020 vote, and now also prohibits citizens from placing future measures on the ballot. That is an unfortunate turn of events. But fortunately, Mississippi was able to go through the legislative process to get this program created. So you might be wondering, what are some of these qualifying conditions that people in Mississippi would need to have to participate in the program? And I've got a list here. I'm going to go over them with you. So you have Alzheimer's, ALS, autism, cancer, chronic pain, Crohn's disease, diabetic and peripheral neuropathy, dementia-related agitation, glaucoma, hepatitis, HIV/AIDS, Huntington's disease, muscular dystrophy, nausea, Parkinson's, post-traumatic stress disorder, seizures, severe and persistent muscle spasms, sickle cell disease, spastic quadriplegia, spinal cord diseases, and ulcerative colitis. So that is the current list of qualifying conditions. As you'll note, some of them are kind of overarching conditions or symptoms such as nausea or muscle spasms, and then some that are more specific like ALS or ulcerative colitis. So qualified patients can purchase up to 3.5 grams of cannabis flower or 1 gram of cannabis concentrates per day from licensed dispensaries. Patients will be limited to purchasing no more than 3 ounces of cannabis flower per month. Now, there are some caps that are involved in this program. Cannabis flower will be capped at 30% THC, while concentrates will be capped at 60% THC. There will be an allowance for caregivers, and the regulatory agency in charge of it is going to be the Mississippi Department of Health. So we should start seeing some more advancements on that in the coming months as regulators and licensing happen. But this is an extremely important advancement for Mississippians. And while it's long overdue and it has had some impacts on the voter initiative process, it is important that these patients who have been denied access for the last 14 months will now have access. Let me just click over to the comments real quick and see if there's any questions about Mississippi. All right, we got some people from Pennsylvania, Myrtle Beach, Iowa, Kentucky, Michigan, and Mississippi. Awesome. So you guys that are watching from Mississippi, this is great news for y'all. We're really happy to see this program created. I'm sure that there will be opportunities in the future to continue to perfect this access, but nonetheless, it is an important advancement for patients in the state of Mississippi. All right, going on to another big highlight of the week is in Minnesota. Minnesota patients will now have access to herbal cannabis products beginning March 1st. So Minnesota is one of the few states that limits patients' access to the herbal formulations. It mandates them to have to use cannabis extracts or infused products rather than the cannabis flower. That moratorium will end on March 1st, according to the newly announced regulations from the Department of Health. State lawmakers had passed legislation last year updating the program so that patients would be permitted to purchase up to 2.5 ounces of medical cannabis flower per 14-day period. So now that has finally been approved and will be available for patients. You know, it's NORML's long-held position that patients deserve access to a wide variety of formulations, including and especially whole cannabis flower. So we're happy to see that change in Minnesota. Also, important movement in Ohio. If you guys have been watching the ballot initiative effort there, you've watched a little bit of the drama. Ohio had to turn in some more signatures, and the Secretary of State's office affirmed this week that the activists finally did collect a sufficient number of signatures from registered voters to place marijuana legalization measures before their lawmakers. So as proposed, the citizen initiative would allow for the possession of 2.5 ounces of marijuana flower or 15 grams of extract for those that are 21 or older. Adult Ohioans could purchase cannabis at retail locations. They could also grow up to 12 plants in a private residence where at least 2 adults reside. I don't know why we need 2 adults in the residence, but there we go. Lawmakers now have 4 months to either enact the proposal as written, amend it, or ignore it. If lawmakers decide in favor of either of the latter 2 options, meaning amend it or ignore it, advocates can elect to gather additional signatures to place the measure on the ballot in November. Again, there's been a lot of highs and lows going on in Ohio, so if you click the link in the description, you'll be able to read more on what is going on in Ohio. So let me just remind everybody in the description of the live stream, the first link there to the update today is going to be all of the things that I'm going over and correlating links to blogs, news, hearings, or our action alerts. So I just want to make sure that you guys know that. So in Ohio, what we're urging Ohioans to do right now is to urge your lawmakers to pass the initiated measure as written and legalize recreational cannabis for adults in Ohio. So there's an opportunity for you to send them a message there today. I'm just going to come back over and check these comments again real quick. We've got people from Indiana and Florida. Awesome. Welcome, friends. I see someone from Pennsylvania. I'm going to get to Pennsylvania next, so that'll be coming up. All right, I don't see any questions quite yet, so I'm going to toggle back over. Let's talk about Pennsylvania. So in Pennsylvania, State Senator Mike Regan, who is a Republican, is seeking to have co-sponsors on a bill to legalize cannabis for those that are 21 years and older. One of the notes that we wanted to point out on this is that there is an option or a caveat to use projected revenue to fund state police and community programs. Now, this is a little bit of an informal hearing on legalization that's scheduled for Monday, and the reason why is that the state Senator Regan has proposed has a full outline proposed in a memo that he submitted, and this hearing will be on said memo. Now, if you go to the first link in this description, there is a link where you will be able to find where to watch the hearing when it happens on Monday, February 7th at 10 a.m. Eastern. So for those of you watching in Pennsylvania, if you have the opportunity to tune in there, please do. Of course, we'll include an update for you at the end of next week, but if you want to watch it live, you can find that link there. Now let's move to another southern state, or I always say another southern state because I'm in Texas, and so like I forget that maybe not all of y'all know that. So I'll try to stop saying that. But in South Carolina, medical cannabis debate began in the Senate. So South Carolina, the Senate kicked off debate on a medical cannabis bill last week, marking the first time in 8 years that this legislation has made it to the chamber floor. The bill's author, Senator Davis, said that he would take on every single argument that has been raised in opposition to this bill, and I'm going to show that you cannot stand in the way of facts and evidence. Now, this bill has been debated over several days. It's been going on for about a week, so that is a little bit longer, I think, than anticipated. So if you're in South Carolina, you can find a link there so that you can send a message to your senators in support of Senate Bill 150, which would give medical cannabis access to those that live in South Carolina. If you were watching last week, you heard a few call to actions in South Dakota, which is what I'm going to talk about next. There were several legislative items that we opposed in South Dakota, and lawmakers have rejected all of these efforts to restrict medical cannabis access. There was a series of proposals that would curtail how and where patients could access and use medical cannabis. So the 3 defeated bills are as follows. House Bill 1004 sought to repeal provisions from the state's voter-approved medical cannabis law that permitted qualified patients to home cultivate for personal use, and it failed to move out of a Senate committee with a vote of 4 against and 2 in favor. Additionally, House Bill 1095 sought to allow local governments to prohibit medical cannabis establishments, and that was defeated by a floor vote of 33 to 31, a close one on that one. House Bill 1094 sought to add restrictions regarding where patients could legally access or use their medical cannabis, and that was also killed in a floor vote. So I want to thank everyone from South Dakota who turned out and made sure that they participated in those action alerts opposing this legislation. It's extremely important that we don't reverse some of the progress that has been made or inhibit patients from having access in any way. All right. Now let's move to Utah. So lawmakers have advanced a bill to the governor's desk that would protect state employees from workplace discrimination for using medical cannabis. So lawmakers in the Utah House and Senate have overwhelmingly approved this legislation, which is called Senate Bill 46, and it would protect state employees from being sanctioned in the workplace for off-the-job use of medical cannabis. It now awaits action from Governor Cox of Utah. And I wanted to share something that NORML's Deputy Director Paul Armentano said about this. He said, while the bill is somewhat limited in scope, it is consistent with the laws of a growing number of jurisdictions that recognize that off-hours cannabis use poses no legitimate threat to either workplace safety or productivity. Tens of millions of Americans consume cannabis responsibly while in the privacy of their own homes, and it serves no purpose to allow employers to unduly discriminate against them. There are some other legislation in states to protect the employment of people who do use cannabis, both recreationally and medicinally, and so we're happy to see that moving in Utah. So those are some of the bigger highlights from the last week of things that have happened. It's been a lot of stuff moving forward. So I want to go to our additional progress through the week. Those were like, yay, we won in Mississippi. Yay, we defeated bad bills in South Dakota. And now these are going to be some of the more differing legislation from across the country. Excuse me, I kind of lost my track of what I was saying there. All right, so for this, we're going to go in alphabetical order, A to Z, and we'll start with Alabama. Alabama has Senate Bill 160, which seeks to amend criminal penalties for the personal possession of up to 2 ounces of marijuana. If passed, it would classify this act as a misdemeanor, but it would make the violation punishable by a fine only. This bill also provides for potential expungement opportunities for those who have been charged or convicted of certain marijuana possession offenses. So currently in Alabama, state law punishes minor possession offenses with up to a year in jail. So I know that for some of us, we would like to see more change, but of course in Alabama, this is a significant effort forward. So if you live in Alabama, there's a link where you can send a message to your lawmakers in support of this decriminalization bill. Talking about Alaska, HB 246 seals the records of low-level crimes for 9 different types of criminal history background checks. So people with otherwise clean records would no longer have to have the rest of their lives derailed with these past marijuana convictions that are no longer being prosecuted today. And just so everybody knows, a hearing on this bill was held on Friday, January 28th, where the bill advanced unanimously. So it's going on to the next stage. And if you live in Alaska, make sure that you go to our blog today and click the link so that you can send a message to your legislators in support of this effort. Moving on to Colorado, Senate Bill 99 seeks to streamline existing automatic record sealing processes for marijuana offenders and extend this process to other offenses. If passed, this bill would provide employment and tenant protections as well for those that have these sealed criminal records. So these are important ways to continue advancing policy in states that do have robust legalization and robust medical markets. There are continued work to be done in these states. So if you live in Colorado, there is a link in the blog today where you can support this expungement and protection bill in Colorado. Moving to Illinois, legislation is pending to facilitate equity among licensed operators in the cannabis industry. So HB 4298 would include preferences for an applicant that is 51% or more owned and controlled by at least one individual with a disability. So this is equity for patients who have perhaps been disproportionately affected by the laws in Illinois, and there's an opportunity for you to send a message in support of this effort. Moving to Maine, Legislative Document 1957 seeks to remove prohibitions in law that keep people with prior drug offenses from participating in the cannabis industry. If passed, the bill would amend rules disqualifying drug offenses so that individuals can legally engage in the state cannabis industry. In addition, they'll be able to act as caregivers for qualifying medical patients and also serve as long-term care facility staff, whereas state law currently prohibits those activities. So for those of you living in Maine, this is an extremely important provision that you can click and send a message to your lawmakers in support of. Now, coming back to South Dakota, earlier we talked about the bad bills that we were able to defeat this week. But this is a bill, Senate Bill 177 in South Dakota, that expands access to the state's existing medical program by allowing qualified patients from tribal communities to purchase medicine outside of their reservation, and would also allow a tribe the right to develop their own cannabis programs under tribal law. Extremely important that we make sure that those in tribal communities have safe access and are able to truly govern their own tribal areas, especially when it has to do with medical cannabis. In West Virginia, there's House Bill 4436, and it would decriminalize the use of cannabis, allowing adults 21 and older to possess up to 1 ounce of dry cannabis flower, while also establishing rules and regulations for retail sales and providing a social equity licensing program. It would expand employment protection, grant clemency to nonviolent offenders who are currently incarcerated on probation or parole, and it would expunge all cannabis-related offenses from the person's criminal record histories. This bill would have no impact on the existing medical marijuana program other than expanding employment protections for those who lawfully consume cannabis. So in West Virginia, current law is that possession of any amount outside of the medical program is a criminal misdemeanor punishable by 6 months in jail and a $1,000 fine. So if you live in West Virginia, these are some extremely important changes for an adult use market in your area, and also allowing patient protections for those that are in the medical cannabis program. Last state of the day is going to be Wisconsin. We've got a companion bill set, SB 545 and AB 846, and this would permit qualifying patients as well as adults to legally possess and purchase up to 2 ounces of cannabis from retail outlets. Out-of-staters could possess up to a quarter ounce. Both patients and non-patients would be permitted to grow up to 6 cannabis plants at home. It also establishes regulations for the production and retail sales of marijuana to anyone over the age of 21. In addition to establishing this regulated system for qualifying medical cannabis patients to access their medicine without having to pay taxes, which is extremely important. We should not be taxing medicine. The legislation would also facilitate expungement of certain past cannabis offenses. So this is extremely popular in Wisconsin. It's polling at 59% for retail adult use market and 83% for legalizing medical cannabis. So if you live in Wisconsin, make sure that you are participating in the actions that we have there. So let me come back over here to your comments and questions and see what I might have missed. Okay, going back up. Got some people from Virginia. Welcome. Logan, I see you're asking about Minnesota, and I did cover that at the beginning of this stream today. I see some questions about the MORE Act. Let me find the link over here. I believe that I did see an update from Morgan recently, and let me just see if I can give everyone a link for that. Yes, House advances Safe Banking Act as part of the America Competes Act. So let me go ahead and copy this link, and I'm going to come over here and all right, so I just dropped in the comments here the update on the MORE Act so that everybody can, take a look, read it for yourself, click around on the links if you want. But I'm going to give a little brief summary from the blog. So a majority of the U.S. House of Representatives passed the American Competes Act of 2022, which includes this provisions for the Secure and Fair Enforcement and Safe Banking Act. I'm sorry. Y'all said more, and I'm giving you Safe Banking Act information. Okay, well, we're going to talk about this real quick. This vote marks the 6th time that members of the House have advanced this act, and it was offered up originally by Representative Ed Perlmutter of Colorado, and it would allow banks and other financial institutions to work with state licensed and cannabis-related businesses, which is something that they are now discouraged from doing. So this is extremely important. Now let's go back to the MORE Act that you guys were actually asking about. And I'm not seeing any current updates on the MORE Act right now. That might be a question that I should follow up and ask Morgan about, but I am going to go ahead and come over here and put the action alert in the comments for y'all. All right, so now there is going to be the MORE action alert so you can participate in that. Make sure that you check out norml.org/act. That has all of our federal actions that we're working on. And then you can go to your state, hover over it, click on it, and it'll show you any state legislation that is currently in motion. So I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to go and participate. As we see, whenever you engage, we're able to have impacts like we did in South Dakota, preventing these bills that were bad from progressing forward. I'm going to read for a few more comments here. All right. I don't see any further comments, questions in the comments here, but just a brief recap. If you go to our first link in the description today, that's my blog post, and it has several of our highlighted advancements that I went over, and then below it has all of our additional actions that you can participate in. I also want to encourage everybody to join, become a member. Your dues help us do the work that we are doing across the state. You can also just be a donor one time if you would like, or monthly donors are also available. I also encourage you to go to our store and shop for some of our amazing swag. And if you aren't already engaged with a chapter in your state, you can also check out our chapters locally and engage with them so that you can make sure to know what's going on at the ground level. You can be engaged in lobby days. You can be engaged in direct actions with those people in your state. So, on that note, I want to tell everybody thank you so much for joining in and watching us today. It's extremely important that we're all engaged in our state as to what's happening and looking at advancement at the federal level as well. So, you saw Safe Banking Act has advanced. The more still needs more pressure to keep it moving. I do remember that when Morgan joined us last week, he noted that 2 more authors were brought onto the MORE Act. So just to let everybody know, we are still avidly working for these changes. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Jax James, NORML State Policy Manager, and you will see me next week on Friday to give you another update as to the news and events and moving legislation for the week. So I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend, and make sure that you are empowering those around you by sharing our action alerts and our links. So have a great day, everybody.